Welcome Telsig community. This is the Telsig podcast. I'm Phil Martin from the University of York, and I'm joined today by two guests, one in the studio, one online. So this is our first hybrid podcast. So this could go either way. Please bear with us. Lilian Joy is a learning technologist here at the University of York, and she has been the go-to person for me for several years for all things learning technology, because she just has this encyclopedic knowledge of teaching and how technology should be applied. So I'm just, she's very much our grounding voice of reason here. And Sita from the University of Sheffield is a learning technologist who has made the transition from teaching and until recently was a trained TESOL practitioner. So thank you both for coming on to talk about this. Just a quick intro to the topic. We're talking today about career development, how to get into learning technology, what it looks like, and hopefully this is going to be useful for people either in learning technology hoping to advance their career or go to the next stage or think about how they could develop, but also people looking to enter the field and do something different. And this all came about because of a White Rose Learning Technology Forum meeting that we had at the University of Leeds back in February, which feels like a long time ago. But anyway, so now over to our guests. I'll start with Sita. I gave you a brief intro there. Can you just fill in the gaps? Tell us a little bit about you and your journey into learning technology so far.
Yeah, it is actually quite a funny journey, actually. I came to the UK back in 2021 for my master's in TESOL and digital education. And then at the time when I was doing my second semester for my master's, I met several learning technologists, like filling up in my classes, and they talk about project management and then digital education, something that was not exactly a popular topic back home. I'm from Indonesia, and it was not something that we kind of invested in. And at the time, I thought it was a really interesting field of work that you can combine your understanding on the pedagogy with technology. And I didn't know at the time that what I have been doing as a teacher back home was actually learning technologist work. So it was from that on, I started looking over the role, got a job as an assistant learning technologist in the University of Leeds in 2022. And then now I'm just in the University of Sheffield working as a learning technologist, and I am loving it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sita. Lilian, over to you. I probably haven't done you justice there by just saying that you're my go-to person. I guess that's not what you describe yourself. So can you give us a bit of your resume and your journey here at York?
Well, I think you've been very kind, Phil. I'm impressed that you think I'm your go-to person, because you've definitely kind of grown leaps and bounds, and put your own stamp on things as well, which is fabulous. So I was formerly known as Lilian Soon. So there was a lot more about me as a learning technologist under that name, because it goes all the way back to 2000 when I kind of started my learning technology job properly. But prior to that, I would say even in Singapore. So Sita and I are from the same neck of the woods, really. When I was teaching in Singapore, I observed the technologists who were working with us, kind of doing teacher training, but they would introduce us to the technology of the day. So it would be like these screens you could put on your OHP that would project from your laptop. This was the technology of the day. And I was teaching multimedia, so I had access to things like authorware, and I could make, interactive self-learning resources, which maybe the average tutor couldn't in those days because they were still using OHPs. I still think the OHPs are wonderful. It's what you do with the tools that you have. So I think as a learning technologist, I think it's a mindset that we all share in common. It doesn't matter what the discipline is that you came from. I used to teach animation, right? And, you guys taught language. And it's more the way you approach your teaching that develops you. So those people who taught me the basics of technology made an impression on me, and it left a kind of interest in technology that I then took on to the next few jobs that I had. And then I finally landed at Thomas Danby College, which is now part of Leeds City College, as their learning technologist, their first learning technologist in 2000. And in those days, we were just exploring the acquisition of a VLE. So those were still the early days. So the first version of Blackboard, was on the market. And it just developed from there, I guess. There's an instinct I think some of us have when you are introduced to a new technology and you instantly think what you can do with it for your students, with your students. And I think that's the underlying thread that kind of we all share, really, from our different backgrounds.
Yeah. I think this is a topic that we've got onto into previous podcasts, and we'll touch on here as well, is like when technology is, how we know when we're actually benefiting the students. I mean, that's a huge area as well. But Sita, just because you mentioned, I think, both of you talked a little bit about, I think the lines are blurred in sometimes you don't have these very clear-cut roles. When does teaching end and learning technology begin? There's a kind of a lot of these roles merge depending on your context. This is a question for either of you, but what do you see at the moment, either at York or at Sheffield or in higher education generally, as being specific contained roles? What are people recruiting for at the moment? What are roles that are kind of established, and which ones are coming into existence more and more?
That's a really interesting question, because I mean, as a learning technologist myself, I can see that it is recruited more and more, but just in different terms. Like, for example, back in Leeds, we call ourselves learning technologists, but in Sheffield, we call ourselves as digital learning officers. So those are the things that, like, essentially we have the same job. That is to make sure that, like, our learners, whoever they are, it could be academics, it could be students, it could be professional service staffs, like, enhance themselves with the technology that we have, as well as, like, not being scared about the technology that we have. So I guess those are the things that, like, in our field, in higher education, were kind of like the trend right now, I would say. Maybe Lilian has different point of view on that, but that's from my point of view.
Yeah, I guess I have the benefit of hindsight, having been kind of in this industry for a while, and like I say, having observed colleagues with that job role back in the day. I actually remember being herded into a lecture theatre and being shown how to use the internet and how to download software from all these different places, and to use a virtual chat room for the first time. Everything that we take for granted now. So the job was different, as in there was quite a lot to introduce people to actual buttons to push and how the things actually worked. Whereas I think there's a lot more now when we maybe recruit learning technologists and what we're looking for. There's this kind of baseline understanding that the person should just be really fluent and comfortable with technology. But as we know, at the start of the podcast, we needed someone else to come into the booth to push the volume up button for us,
I was hoping you wouldn't mention that.
But it just goes to show that, we're still learning. Everyone can learn, right? So what do you recruit for when you actually want to bring a learning technologist into your organization now? I think when I was recruited for this particular role, there was a focus on accessibility, because we needed that. There was a gap, if you like, in our team for someone to focus in on that. And I've noticed when I've spoken to other people who want to be a learning technologist who are looking to get into the field, if I speak to them about digital accessibility, they can look at me with a blank face. And I kind of think it's very dangerous to want to be a learning technologist and not know the regulations. It's like wanting to be a chef and not understanding allergies. You just would never get hired. So the things have changed. The requirements for what you're supposed to be aware of has changed quite dramatically in the last few years, I would say. And that's maybe a sign of the industry that, education itself is getting very regulated. What do you think? What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, was it 2018 we were talking about there was a bit of a regulation landmark there because you can talk much more fluently about this than me with your experience, but this was the time at which you really needed to know, and not just as learning technologists, if you're working with students and just your general awareness of accessibility is going to help you, I guess, in any career. But certainly when you're at the eye of the storm here, working with students, increasingly so online, having an awareness of all the things that we associate with, people who might have visual impairments, for example, but also just what exactly is good practice, what does it look like, UDL guidelines and things like that. So was 2018 a turning point? I guess, Sita, this was before that you made your jump into learning technology, so you weren't in the field pre-2018, but...
Yeah, it is also something that, like, as a teacher, we kind of have to understand as well. There is a pedagogical understanding because I taught English and language teaching was expected to be more inclusive towards, people, especially back home. It's a foreign language. It's not our second language or first language. I think I understood why it has to be regulated at that time. At the same time, I totally agree with what Lilian said about people's the expectation that you need to understand regulations and accessibility was not exactly there, and that's probably why I had the upper hand, because I did my master's and they were literally drilled me over you have to be accessible, you have to do this in my assignments. And that got me into an understanding that this is actually very important, so yeah, the expectation was a little bit shocking for me. It's a culture shock for me when I started in the field of learning technology.
Lilian, did you, when this came along in 2018, we had a big central drive, did you have to, adjust your skill set, or was there much cramming for you to do? Or did you, because you've got this back catalogue of experience, you were able to draw on that and you already felt fairly prepped for this?
A bit of both. So as part of my back catalogue, as it were, I was a JISC TechDis ambassador and advisor. So I used to advise people on how best to use technology to work with people with learning difficulties or disabilities. So I had a lot of that already under my belt, that experience. I think the difficulty was blending what I knew in a very creative and we were allowed in further education to be a bit more gung-ho with technologies that we adopted. You'll understand this, Phil. I remember when you first joined, I totally understood where you were coming from. At the university, you have to be so careful about what tools and what technologies you use, because you got to think about data security, protection. You can't just send students off to use anything that just works for them. You have a responsibility to keep them safe as well. So because of that was the change for me. I had to adjust I know a tool that will do that better than anything else. I had to change from that stance to, well, this is what we have that will meet 90% of your needs. And the other part, had to be a compromise half the time. I mean, a lot of the technologies we have as standard at the uni now are really, really good. But at the time, we didn't yet have, for instance, provision for everybody to use things like text to help read and write. We didn't have the kind of systematic access to accessible maths creation tools. All this had to be built in through a lot of research with students and staff. So it was a bit of both. You know, I had an instinct about things that would work, but then you had to make it work within the establishment. And that is, I think, something like if I had to go to another establishment now, I would still have to learn a different set of, you know, tools that they might use and how that could best be adapted. I'm learning every day. This morning I was learning something quite specific, like, A-level teachers might laugh at us at HE level, but the students are coming to us saying, OneNote's really good because they can follow what's on the board without having to strain their eyes. They have a copy of it straight away. We're a Google university, so we don't have that, you know, familiarity with using OneNote for that kind of thing. But it's a great technology to overcome sight impairment. So that's what we were doing this morning. So, you know, I'm still learning. I'm still picking up stuff. I guess the thing that makes me a learning technologist is I'm not afraid of the buttons. I'll just go and poke and go, you should be able to do X. Where's that button? And, you know we can stretch something. And we also know if that doesn't exist, that it's a bad tool. Step away now.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe it's a mindset that's required rather than anything else, because I always quite like that idea of, I can relate to everything you're saying. You should be able to do that. How do you do that on this platform? What's your equivalent of, and you have that kind of curious edge to the way you view some of these platforms. So I think I was going to ask as well, just to sharpen things up a little bit for people who might be looking at learning technology roles from a slightly different vantage point. So can we track sideways a little bit and have each of you describe kind of a day in the life, perhaps, of you when you're in your current role? Is there such a thing as a typical day? If there's not, maybe we can zoom out and call it a week or something like that. But what's the routine of your current roles? And Sita, I'm particularly interested, obviously, you're able to compare this to your very recent teaching experience. So, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. I mean, day to day, it's very boring. It's all about planning. Because currently in Sheffield, my main role is that I'm helping the transition for us from Blackboard Original to Blackboard Ultra. So that's literally what I have been doing every day. Like I'm planning on trainings, planning on workshops, and then creating contents, materials for trainings, and then inviting people and everything. Other than that, actually things that is almost similar like you, Phil. We're creating an event, discussions, workshops, or showcase. So inviting academics to share their practices in learning technology field, or just give them a platform to showcase about what they're doing with educational technology and how it enhances their courses or their modules, for example, like that. But other than that, it's very administrative. It's a very boring job. But at the same time, within those administrative jobs, it is very insightful from my point of view, mainly because I always learn something new every day. For example, I never knew that Blackboard Ultra could do this, for example, like that, or listening to academics sharing their practices. I have found about this, can you please research something about it? And I ended up in a rabbit hole usually, and trying to research about I never knew that we have technology about, let's say, in Chinese or Japanese or Korean languages that actually accommodate screen readers, for example, like that. Especially now that I'm working with Google Workspace, I think same with York as well. It used to be in Microsoft with Lates. I also learned a lot of things, like new things about the workspace itself. Like, oh, we can do this, we can do that. And then sometimes also like a little bit complaining internally, like, oh, we used to have this features in Microsoft. Now we don't have it in Google, you know? So that's kind of like what my day-to-day looks like, you know, a bit both of like being bored, but at the same time being inspired. At the same time, also like learning something new every day, but also complaining about like, we could have done better about this, you know? So yeah, that's for me.
I was going to pass over to Lilian, but I just wanted to check with both of you. Lilian, I think you are as central roles. Are you deemed as central teams, and you would work across departments and across faculty lines?
No, I'm working like specifically for the faculty.
Which faculty do you work for?
It's arts and humanities.
The best one. That's the one I sit on for FLTG, so I can vouch. No offense, STEM, but sorry, Lilian, over to you. How does your working week?
Okay, so I'm digital education manager, so it's a little bit more varied, I'd say. And I also have responsibility for accessibility side of things, and I am what we call technology mum for a few of our tools. So we have mums and dads, you know, like Panopto mum and VLE dad, that kind of thing. So my week is very, very varied. My day is very varied. So it'll kind of be a combination of consultations with people who want to figure out how to do X. And it could be anything from like they've got a group assignment and they want to use something on the VLE, but they want it to be a little bit, you know, they want students to have some agency outside of that, which, you know, obviously you can't easily do within the VLE. So there's quite a lot of sometimes negotiation around a particular use case. Then like today, I've had a consultation about an accessible problem, you know, accessibility problem, helping students to actually see handwritten stuff. And that works across multiple faculties and disciplines. So there was an economics, there's a management, there's a chemistry, you know, so there's quite a lot around there. So part of that will involve me having to go away and create some resources, kind of like what Sita is having to do. You kind of think, well, I'm going to get more and more of these questions. So as quickly as possible, I want to make a quick and dirty video that I can send out to people in support of, and to spread this work as well to more people. So there's stuff around that which is really fun. Other things I would do that I really, really enjoy is organizing user group meetings. Phil's helped me out with some of those before. Thank you, Phil. But, you know, around certain tools, you bring people together and you get them to share what they're doing. That's always the fun part for me because, as Sita said, you learn so much when someone else tells you what they've done with the tool and you go, oh, yeah, never occurred to me. Because we're not always in a position where we're actually doing the teaching anymore. So where we used to be maybe more creative because we had to make things fit what our plan was, we're busy maybe encouraging others to adopt the tool, and actually you lose a little bit of that edge if you don't sit next to a lecturer, you know, and I find you learn the most from that. And sitting next to students and looking at how they're doing stuff. It's so exciting. So as much as possible, I put into my day contact time with students and contact time with lecturers because selfishly, I enjoy that more than anything else in the job. And of course, there's, as Sita says, there is some of the boring stuff. You're answering tickets and emails, and you try and work smart, right? You create templates so you can just kind of like, just send stop reply, send them to this resource, and get those things as quickly as possible out of the way so you can do the fun stuff.
Yes, I agree with that.
You mentioned the word negotiation. I'm just going to drill down on that a little bit. Is that a euphemism, or do you have, I guess, how much of the role, and again, question for both of you, is interpersonal relationships? Because I have this, and the ability to communicate, because this might be a bit of an unfair stereotype, but you get the impression that you're working with a lot of subject matter experts who are kind of a big deal, perhaps, and kind of have been doing things perhaps their own way for a long time. And your job is, especially with accessibility guidelines coming in, and there's a legal aspect to this, the art of persuasion and, as you say, let's call it negotiation, must be something that needs to be, I picture it as being something that is a really pivotal part of the role. Is that fair, or how would you describe working with subject matter experts, and what are the more kind of like prickly situations that you've been in? You can keep everything anonymous, obviously.
Well, okay, I can start first. I mean, it's a little bit different for me. I have two different experiences from two different institutions. Back in Leeds, when I was working in the Faculty of Engineering and Physical Sciences, they are very straightforward. Like if they don't like it, they will say like, I don't like it. And if they liked it, they will think that that is like the most amazing ideas they've ever heard. And they thought that I was a genius. So the way to mitigate and make sure that we have a common ground on that is like kind of like putting them into a specific expectation that this is my skill sets and this is what you want to achieve and this is what I can do, but I need your help, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of different approach. But in the arts and humanities now, everyone is just so agreeable. So negotiation is more into like telling them like, listen, we need to do A, for example, like that. But I need your guidance on like how you do things, and I will just find a workaround on that. So you are going to be comfortable in your own way, and I can also like put my input to make sure that everyone is comfortable. So it's a little bit of like different approaches in terms of negotiation with subject matter experts. But I guess it's more into like expectations, I would say. Like the expectation is quite different in terms of negotiating to subject matter experts. I guess Lilian has a variety of stories, crazy or fun stories about that.
I think she looks like she's thinking about which ones are shareable at the moment.
I have swum through a sea of sharks and come out the other side. Yeah. It's all been enjoyable, to be fair, because I think you expect that of the job as well, don't you? Because you've got the laggards, you've got the enthusiasts. So it all, a bad day is made up for with a good day, and some excitement that colleagues show makes up for having someone who goes, I'm not going to do this. And I think over time, you build up this capacity to understand that it may not be the right time for that person to do X or adopt Y. And I think something I've learned with age, that you push on a door, and if it's open and you can do the thing, you do the thing and you enjoy it. And if you push on another door and it's not going to open for you, you can go and revisit it another time, but not to throw so much energy at it, because there is so much work to do, right? I think a learning technologist work is never done. You could keep going and fine-tuning and finding other people to develop all the time. So, it's how you manage your own work. So the negotiation thing depends on whether it's a non-negotiable. You could say a lot of the accessibility work is non-negotiable, but you still have to sometimes bide your time and approach it at the right time for that person. And I always use Hans Rosling's way of thinking, Factfulness. If you haven't read that book, it's an absolutely must read. It's just a way of thinking that I've applied to any kind of situation, like staff development, for instance. I always prepare myself for the fact that there's going to be about 4 or 5 groupings of people. You're going to have the enthusiasts who will just, whatever you say, they'll try out. Then you've got a group of people who, oh, go on then, this looks interesting, I'll try it out, but they want a little bit more guidance. Then you've got the people who, I don't really want to, but okay, but I'll do it in my own time, not when you say. And then you've got the people who don't want to know. They want the secretaries to come back and sit in the typing pool and do all their work for them. If you have that expectation, then that's more realistic, that you can plan not just one training workshop, but you're prepared for the fact that there'll be people who don't turn up, there'll be people who want the recording, there'll be people who go, oh, I just want notes, I don't want the recording. There'll be people who want a one-to-one 10 times a week. We call them frequent flyers. I don't know if you ever worked for them, Sita. But you've got to acknowledge that these are people. That's what we have to work with, you know?
Yeah.
It would be so boring if everybody was equally enthusiastic. We'd be in La La Land or something, wouldn't we? So, yeah, this is what makes the job really rich.
Yeah, I mean, like, I totally agree with Lilian, like the aspect of like just working with people, you know, like because they are essentially like, usually with my colleagues, learning technology colleagues, we call them like fellow nerds in technologies as well. Because like there are also fellow nerds. There are also some people who's like being the haters for us, you know? And I think like being in Sheffield now, like being in a different institution, I learned to let go. Same way like what Lilian said. Like I learned to let go that like some people will not always agree to what I said. And like some people will just like said that like, oh, that's ridiculous. Like why would we even do that? We have been working so perfectly well within the systems. Why are you trying to change it? And I was like, okay, cool. We'll do it next time when you actually needed it. And oftentimes they actually needed it in the near future. So I used to not let go of that back in Leeds. Like I used to be like pushing it forward, saying that like, oh, we get to make sure they aren't doing it, you know, that kind of thing. But I think that's common within the Asian experience, I must say.
The thing that I was thinking about was before something you said triggered a question I really hope I remember in a minute. Was just about skills development and keeping up to date. So we have, you've got your interpersonal skills that you sort of develop with experience, your knowledge of universal design for learning or whatever. Scanning the horizon for new technology is a thing that seems to come up in learning technology circles as well. How do you guys stay current with your skill set? And specifically, what would you recommend for people who are trying to kind of skill up in the area of learning technology, whether they are coming from a sort of related but slightly different field, or what do you guys do to stay sharp in the knowledge that's needed for your roles?
Should I start first, Lilian, as the newcomer in the field? Yeah. I personally really like to do networking and like see what the online community has to say, because it is very interesting what people are actually writing online. That's why I asked Lilian, like, can you please share me your blog? I would love to read it. That's how I stay current to like, what's the current trend? What's the development? LinkedIn is a gem for me. Blue Sky, Twitter, X. Sorry, they say it as X now. Those are places where I thought like platforms like that has engaging discussions and like what exactly is happening in the field. And it's very real time in a way that like people just like put their opinions, put their comments on like new technology emergence, for example. And then they started like having a discussions. And it's really nice to see like what other people said. Like, you know, same way that we are dealing with the subject matter experts, some people would be just like, oh, this is ridiculous. And then there are some people who thinks that like, I actually have another point of views, you know? So through those networkings, through those online communities, I found myself learning a lot, basically from people. And even if, let's say, they are not exactly in the field of learning technologies, maybe they're just like the marketing team from like some tools, for example, you always learn something new. But at the same time, because I came from like, you know, a master's degree and research is something that I personally enjoyed, doing some research and then like reading some research from journals and then like attending conferences. I really love attending conferences and actually listen to people's thought, like opening their brain out and then like try to find out what exactly is the rationale why you do that, you know, that kind of thing is something that is very valuable in my role and like how that is actually how I start this role. Like I was just in the research of educational technology and I ended up hooked up with being a learning technologist. So I think like, stay curious within the field itself in terms of like, stay curious with the people and stay curious with the knowledge itself. It's something that makes me also stay current with the development, I must say.
That sounds very sensible. And definitely, I think I used to do a lot more. Well, the early days before Twitter was born, there was a social network called Jaiku, which I think Google bought and killed, like they normally do. But some of us learning technologists in the day were starting to do social networking, and it was a much more pleasant experience because it wasn't full of nonsense, and you could find your network and build up your social network that way, your professional networking, your personal learning network. And then it just got a little bit much. But, I think just following a few key people, if you can't deal with the plethora of voices, finding your few heroes and following them, that's been really, really helpful. And challenging your own understanding of things. Just because your hero says one thing doesn't mean you have to, follow along. But just following some diverse voices, following some people who are willing to experiment with technology, so it saves you time. They're doing the review. That saves you a ton of time. I mean, the number of technologies that are being put out now is faster than you could possibly test out, right? So you can't do everything, and you always have to make decisions. But we're at that era where you have to make concerted efforts. I feel like I went through a golden era where I just kind of could pick up the technology and just roll with it. And I think there's a certain step up in the level of technology that's happening with AI and stuff like that, where you have to learn, you have to step up or change your skill set a little bit. So apart from like, knowing how to do prompt engineering to get the best out of your new technologies, there's other things that are really challenging me, like to work with some subject matter experts. I'm really having to do a lot of research into things that I might not actually be familiar with. So helping to make RStudio a little bit more accessible or to generate better formats. I don't use RStudio, but I've had to turn it on, look at it, close it down because it made me panic, open it up again, and know that by the time I open it up again in 5 times, 8 times, it will start to look familiar because I know as a learning technologist, I can learn anything and just have a go. And so we've got to the point now, a student needed a different style sheet on RStudio, and we've managed to provide that through, I knew how to direct someone to get that made for the student. And it's learning as well, not just that you have to have all the skills. I think it's realizing you have to use the best of everyone around you, and not feel like you've got to do it all, but knowing how to apply not just the mindset or the buttons, the technology, but knowing how to apply the right person who can do the job faster than you can. It's really hard because I want to know everything. I want to be able to do everything. So having to step back and go, yeah, but that would take me hours to learn, and someone else could do that so much faster. So it's learning to kind of start, I don't want to say use people, but to understand that resources include the networks that you've built up, right? You can ask someone for an hour of their time, or they could do a job for you much faster than you could ever learn it yourself. So I guess for me, skilling up includes expanding that network. Jiskmail is fabulous. All the Jiskmail lists, ALT, the Association for Learning Technology. I think that's crucial to be a member of. Certainly, as Sita said, going to conferences, if you are supported to go for conferences, and if not, paying your own way because you really, really want to go. And continuing to pick up a diverse range of skills, I think. I'm learning to Braille, which is non-technology. It's literally just using slate and stuff, just learning the whole spectrum of skills that are there to be learned. It's a really rich landscape. It's very exciting. We're very lucky compared to subject matter experts who dive into a tunnel. We get to wander the whole cave system.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But they like it. I think that's what well, not. I mean, a lot of the subject matter experts that I've worked with or got to know over the years. It's I think it seems to be just a different mindset. I think Lilian, you and I once talked about I'd rather do 100 master's degrees than a PhD. But it's you can talk to some people who are fantastically knowledgeable. They have that depth, and the depth versus breadth, but they're very interested in this particular slice of information. But if you stray outside of that, I consistently fail to pique certain people's interest in things that I was sure that I'd be able to drag them outside of their SME circle. But the fight goes on. So Lilian, you touched on quite a lot of. One of my questions was going to be breadth versus depth as well, and I guess breadth is always going to be the thing for us because we never know what's going to come in useful. Braille is something that it's a symptom of the curiosity that's made you good at so many other things, right? I mean, it's like it's not being bound by that. What am I going to use this for within the next 10 minutes? And
yeah, absolutely. I think I'm very much affected by how useful that knowledge is going to be to help me help others. So I think my interest in Braille was driven. Now, surprisingly, the first blind student I worked with on maths, so I do a lot of work on accessible maths. I'm a graphic designer by training. But I'm now doing accessible math stuff, right? And working with her opened up my eyes to what a big step up it was to go from just even going to university is a big step up for a lot of our young people, but to do it when you're vision impaired is a huge thing. And that really humbled me. It kind of made me think, of course I can learn anything. And of course all the lecturers should do stuff, because here's someone who is having to do all this without one of the senses that we would take for granted. And I kind of think nothing is too hard for us to do. Think of how much she has to reach, to make it happen for herself. But the funny thing is, working with her, she was so good with her technology, I never questioned it. The next person I met who wasn't so confident with technology, it meant that I had to know a little bit more. And that's what's prompted me to want to know Braille. So it's, I guess, when someone else needs you have to dig deeper, or you have to be more. And that's where you grow, right? That's where you kind of go, oh, I thought I could take this for granted, but actually I can't. I have to reach a little bit more to help this person. And in so doing, it's going to expand, broaden my horizons and all the rest of it. It's fascinating. And like I say, one VI student needs X to happen for her, another one needs Y to happen for them, or it could be about hearing impairment or even limb difference. And until you get to that story by the students, and you kind of realize, we just tell people to Control-Alt-Delete or, Windows Shift and arrow key. And if you've only got one limb, that's really, really hard to do. What's the solution? And it's these stories by real people that really, I guess, I feel that's the big motivating factor, not the overarching mission statement of an organization. It's the real stories of real people that need to do something that really add that kind of experiential, gives you that depth of experience. It's like going on a holiday and you can see a picture or a video of someone else's holiday, but it's not the same as when you're in it yourself and experiencing it. And I can read stories of how people have worked with disabled students, but when I'm working with them, it's a whole different thing. It's a full color, full reality. And it processes in your brain differently as well. So I don't think this thing they're talking about skills and stuff, there is an aspect where you can read about someone else's journey and feel affected by it, but it's never going to be the same as you going through it yourself, right? So, this podcast is going to be interesting. I don't know what people will get from it when they listen to it. I know you get a layer of something when you listen and you read and you do your research, but when you actually spend time with other people and help them to achieve something, that's the biggest kind of learning and skills development you could possibly get. And it's a gift. It's a gift that someone gives to you by spending time with you. It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I really like what Phil said about instead of doing PhD, we do 100 masters. And
I think Lilian
is
said it.
how
I stole it.
I mean, both of you said that, and it actually resonates with me because that's how I feel working as a learning technologist in the span of almost 2.5 years now. I feel like this is my 30th master's degree in learning technology and digital education because we learn so much, not only from ourselves, but also from people. If I take an example of my own case studies, I'm advocating a lot for inclusive design of learning because I myself back in 2021, 2022, was an international student that doesn't understand what is going on in the digital education in the UK. We never had this kind of technology before. And being able to go behind the scene and see that this is the process on how the student experiences were actually generated and used to be a part of that international community who felt why no one told me about this, that kind of thing was really eye-opening. And that's if Lillian's motivating factor was actually experiencing and try to be in that person's shoes, my motivating factor is because I used to be in that part of community and I wanted people to not have the same bad experience, but only the good experience. And how can I enhance that? And that's actually my motivating factor for being a learning technologist. I want them to be able to be as a tech expert as students from England or Europe, those Western and developed countries. I want people to actually want to understand and have more digital literacies, not only just buttons download and then read it. No one my peers didn't know that we can actually do screen readers, for example, that. No one ever actually heard the word accessibility until we were in a master's degree. Or no one ever thought that being inclusive means that we made everyone have the same opportunities and actually arrange it in the same way to make sure that everyone is accommodated. So those are something that I think was very eye-opening in my early career.
Yeah, I think listening to all this is gonna be useful for a lot of people because I think listening to both of you talk, it gives a really clear picture of what it is like in the mindset of a learning technologist at the moment in higher education. So listening to the kind of topics that you're covering and the kind of things that you're raising really kind of gives people who perhaps aren't familiar with the roles something on which to hang their hat and think, okay, I kind of get the parameters of the role now. I get what your priorities are and what you're trying to do. I think I just wanted to round us off perhaps with a couple of any other points that you'd think would be worth noting here as well, but for people listening, people trying to upskill and get themselves into the field. But is there anything that's very pressing at the moment. And Lilian, I liked your point because you actually reminded me of the thing that I was going to say earlier, which was this idea of teamwork. And I think what's going to be most valuable is not the fact that a learning technologist has to be some kind of all-encompassing knowledge fountain of everything digital, although Lilian kind of is that. But it's more about how you fit within your team. And it's so great working with, a bunch of people who you say, oh, I know I can go to this person because they know all about, they can fix this problem that I have. And you have enough overlap, but enough difference to keep things interesting. So, yeah, that was something I meant to ask. So thanks for flagging that. But the one skill I guess everyone's just dominating is AI, and Lilian raised it, so we won't linger too much. Lord knows we've done enough podcast episodes on this, but so everyone, I guess, that's always going to be a good way to spend your time at the moment, becoming familiar with AI packages, what they can help you with, what you can farm out to them, what the ethical considerations are. So though that's a massive topic that people can explore outside of the AI vortex, is there anything that particularly at the moment people serious about a career in learning technology really need to be aware of at the moment, key skills that we're looking to develop? And we've mentioned accessibility and things like that, but anything that we haven't covered yet that you think would be really worth people thinking about if they are on this career course?
You want to go first, Lilian?
Well, I think one of the things that's really stood me in good stead is that pedagogical, that scholarship of teaching and learning, the pedagogy, and being able to have a theoretical lens on why something might be a better way to do learning. I think underneath all the technology, you scrape it all back and it's about teaching and learning. I think, that's your baseline. You have to be quite strong on that field. I love anyone who teaches languages because they are seriously the most creative bunch of people ever. My favorite people I ever worked with were ESOL teachers, because you have to be so creative to get concepts that are quite abstract across, right? Especially with language. So that creativity just leads to that adoption of technology quite naturally, but then you'll seamlessly go back to what works. I mean, I'm sat here with my phone, but underneath that is a notebook and a pen, I will reach for whatever works regardless. And I think that flexibility and understanding that not everyone is, as Sita said, not everyone wants to do it technology, but being willing to work with them to answer the teaching and learning problem, regardless of whether it's technology-led. I think that builds up trust, that builds up your understanding of, you don't want to walk around with a solution looking for a problem. We always say that about certain technologies. You want to listen first to what they're trying to do and then use your entire experience, not just the technology angle to solve it. So yeah, for me, I think, building up that learning technology experience actually has to go hand in hand with your kind of baseline understanding of how people learn and what motivates them.
Brilliant. Yeah, Sita, anything you can add there?
I think something that I observed while I started this career, and something that I realized that is not exactly emphasized enough when you started being in this, in this field of work, is that there's so many project managements. We work project by project based on whoever subject matter experts that you are collaborating with. And I mean, I have done my portion of project managing back home as a teacher, you're managing classes, managing events and everything. But I realized that when I saw my colleagues who is just also starting their role in learning technology, they started to become really overwhelmed with juggling multiple projects, and then like trying to connect with stakeholders, trying to manage expectations, meeting deadlines that is often, under time constraints. Those are the skills that not a lot of people are naturally gifted with. Like, unless you are teaching, mini gremlins, for example, you know exactly what you need to manage, for example, like that. Like, as teachers, it's naturally come to you. But what if you are not from like teaching backgrounds? What if you want to be in this field of work, but you don't have the natural management role before that? And that is something that, even as someone who did project management back then, I caught off guard with it, because like, why is it not emphasized that I have to juggle multiple projects with different people, with different expectations, with different deadlines? And like, they expected us to already knew that, yeah, project management is inside there. But then like, how do I get more, not necessarily training, but more into like, how do I get more guidance on this, especially in the, in the context of learning technology? Because you approach it differently. It's a people technology based work. It's not only with people, it's not only with technology. You are the bridge between those two. And those are a different like approach entirely. And that was something that I thought was weirdly not emphasized. I don't know, like, if both of you, Phil and Lilian, saying that it was there. Maybe it's because I'm new. Maybe it's because of my experience.
No, I think you make a very valid point, Siti. And I think it's not just for people going into jobs on learning technology. It's almost any job nowadays comes with a huge amount of inputs. So obviously when I started teaching, they were showing us how to use email. Like I say, the internet it was just a fledgling. Everything was Times New Roman and hyperlinks were bright blue, right? And Netscape was still a thing. And the amount of technology overwhelming us was way low. Mobile phones hadn't been invented yet. Whereas now you step into the job, you could be getting an email, a Slack message, a WhatsApp, a JISC mail. You could be multiple sources, communities. You've got LinkedIn, you've got all these different ways of communicating and networking. And your information is overwhelming and overloading. So you'll get administrative information, which you want to store for future use, but where do you store it? Do you store it in your email? Do you store it in, some things live in your calendar, some things. So your choice, I think Siti makes a very, very valid point. And I know some people will kind of go, oh, I'm going to do everything in Word, in a Google Doc. And I'm like, oh, it's like, so to add to what you're saying about what skill do you need, I think underlying everything is that sense of being able to create a database. Okay. So your personal database is going to pay off big time as a learning technologist. So I tag everything to the nth degree. I use Notion. I have used Evernote in the past. I've used Obsidian. I've used all kinds of things. My current favorite is Notion. So I've invested a lot of that. My Notion pages are almost all databases. So I can pop something in there, can filter it, sort it any which way I want. I use tagging because I need to find my information so I can help people, right? So whatever random thing I've come across, I want to be able to find it again. So that for me is, as Siti says, maybe that is a key skill as well in order to cope with the breadth and the depth that we have to go into. And my thing about like being able to find something again is so prevalent that I'll even, I'm turning to the front page of my notebook to show Phil my index. Even my handwritten notes are indexed so I can find that information, right? And it's got broad areas so I can quickly look in a sub area and find the information I need. So yeah, information retrieval. I think we have to convert ourselves into a database.
Yeah. And I think, as you were talking, I think that's probably we could do a whole episode on that. I mean, it's something I just, not just, digital overload is one thing, but time management in in this era that we live, when you have everything competing for your time and attention all at once. And it is, the whole economy is built around capturing people's attention, and that's before you get to work. So, I think it's a huge thing. And I think time management and just curating your own digital, database, repository. Yeah, this is a huge thing that we don't really talk about, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed.
True.
But we're now on the hour mark, so over the hour mark. That was all that singing we did at the beginning. Pushed us over. But, I just wanted to say thank you very much to both of you. This has been really interesting, and I do hope that a lot of people find this a valuable resource to listen to. Sita, are you going to be attending did you go to the one in Leeds? Are you going to be at any more in the future?
I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, I will be around. I still go to several events that my colleagues back in Leeds were inviting me online or in person, and it's really close. York and Leeds is very close to Sheffield, so I'll be around. You'll see me.
It would be great to see you in person, we'll catch up then. Lily, are you still White Rose, or have you?
Yeah, so the next White Rose Learning Technology event's on the 7th of November on Authentic Assessment. That's online, and then there will be a face-to-face unconference, not officially announced yet, but we've discussed it. There'll be an unconference where us learning technologists geeks can get together and just share whatever we're most passionate about on that day. So, look out for details.
We have a sneak peek.
Yeah, all right, that's something to look forward to. Thank you very much, Lilian. And thank you, Siti. I'm going to switch us off now, but stick around and we'll say goodbye properly. But thank you very much for joining us.